For the White Rose Philosophical Study Group, I'm Mark Freeman. For more information about the White Rose Philosophical Study Group or the Church of Illumination, please see the links in the description below. Links to all our videos are also included. This is video number 14 in this series, where we discuss spiritual and philosophical concepts that can be applied to everyday life or any other worthy endeavor. As we said in our last video, this lecture will be dedicated to listener comments and questions. First comment: I have caught you in a contradiction. You have spoken of light as time transcendent, meaning its past, present, and future locations are predetermined. This would seem to mean that all things are predetermined as well, yet you continue to talk about free will and how it is what we are on earth to experience. How do you resolve this? Either events are predetermined or they're not. Which is it? Answer: both are correct. It isn't either or. How is this possible? We will explain. Imagine you are on a cruise liner, headed for a specific destination. The ship's destination is predetermined, yet you have free will to avail yourself of any or all of the amenities on the ship. You can go where you want and do what you want, and yet you will arrive at the predetermined destination along with all of the other passengers. Consider the planet we inhabit. Its orbit and location around the sun are predetermined, to the point where we will know exactly where the planet will be in relation to the sun years in advance. And yet, you have free will to go anywhere and do anything on earth that you desire. Consider a library of books. The contents of each book is predetermined. However, you are free to read or not read any book you choose. You are free to read all of a book, part of it, or even read it backwards or randomly. The book remains predetermined. However, you have the free will to determine how you will experience that predetermination. In as far as human events are concerned, there are certain points in the past, present, and future that are predetermined. However, your actions leading up to the event will determine how involved and or affected by it you will be. You have free will to be a part of it or not. Throughout the world, nature, the universe, and all systems, there is a combination of equal parts exact order and apparent chaos. The system itself is finite, ordered, and preordained to function in a specific manner. However, within each system are infinite possibilities and freedom for self-determination. In our earlier example of the white movie screen upon which any movie may be projected, the screen itself is finite, and its limited shape is predetermined. However, an infinite number of color and motion possibilities exist within that predetermined shape. This combination of the finite and the infinite, or predestination and freedom of choice, exists in the spiritual realm as well. And here we have the opportunity to discuss something that some of our listeners may have never considered. In your physical existence, if you are not an orphan, you were born into a family. That family lived in a community. That community was within a county or district. That county or district was in a state or province. The state or province was part of a nation. That nation was part of an alliance with other nations. And whether friend or foe, all nations are part of the earth as a whole. Each one of these units are overseen by an angelic or divine hierarch residing in the unseen spiritual realm. In ancient times, these beings were referred to as gods, as in the God of Israel, who was, in the Hebrews' belief at the time, their God and their God only. These divine beings are the true rulers of the world. No matter what your relationship with your biological parents, no matter what it happens to be, your soul is part of a spiritual family whose destiny is overseen by your spiritual father and mother, who reside in the spiritual realm and of whom your biological parents are the avatars to a greater or lesser degree. You have your own personal angel, hierarch, or spiritual guide, who is exclusively yours and is there to help you to the degree that you are attuned to and receptive to that help. Your spiritual family, which does not necessarily mean your blood relatives, but rather those souls in whom you share a common spiritual destiny, and this is more times than not a large family, is under the constant guidance of a spiritual father and mother who do not incarnate in the flesh, but are nonetheless always there to guide you and protect you, and see to it that the predetermined destiny of the family is fulfilled. You have free will to decide through your thoughts, feelings, and actions as to whether you are part of that destiny or not. All individuals, groups of individuals, communities, churches, organizations, companies, political parties, villages, towns, counties, states, provinces, territories, nations, branches of the military, judicial institutions, legislative bodies, executive offices, bureaus, administrative offices, law enforcement, medical organizations, colleges, universities, schools, fraternities, sororities, the many branches of the human race, the different species of animals, the oceans, the land, the atmosphere, all of these are overseen by a specific divine hierarch acting only within the will of the divine light of God. The life of all these things, their purpose, their birth, length of life, and eventual decline or transformation are all predetermined. However, each individual who is a part of these different systems or units has the free will to act in harmony with that divine purpose, ignore it, or work against it. To put it in simpler terms of understanding, imagine an empty theater open for general admission with 1,000 seats. If all the seats are filled when the audience arrives, we know in advance exactly what the seating configuration of that audience will be. However, because it is general admission, we cannot know who is sitting where or when they will arrive. Note, however, that those who arrive first have more free will to decide where they sit than those who arrive late when most of the seats are already occupied. This is important to note and to understand. If you remain inactive and unaware of events taking place around you that will directly affect your life, as the consequences of those events begin to reach a climax, you will have less and less opportunity to act according to your own will and will be subject to the system's limitations. For example, when the military draft was instituted during World War II, many young men signed up voluntarily for the duration of the war so they would have some measure of control over where they went and what they did. Those who waited to be drafted had no control over their fate whatsoever. We can also see this same principle in the differences between the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. On the macro scale, speaking in this way of planets, solar systems, and galaxies, these macro systems are easily observed and their future is predetermined. However, when we get on the quantum scale, we discover that nothing is predetermined until it is interacting with something else. On the large macro scale, there is less free will. On the micro scale, there is more free will. Now, when we speak of the divine hierarchs of nations, The question may be fairly asked if these beings are responsible for the horrific wars which occur between nations, as one hierarch battling another. The answer to this is an unequivocal no. War, and all the horrors of war, are the result of man's disobedience to divine law, his unrelenting desire to dominate his fellow human beings, and his lust to obtain what he believes to be something for nothing, or as much as possible for as little as possible. The hierarchs, or national guardian angels, are no different in function than your own personal guardian angel. You have free will to follow divine law or not. If you do, you will reap the benefits. If you don't, you will reap the unpleasant consequences. The angel is there to see to it that your life fulfills its purpose outside of your personal decisions, just as an employer is there to see to it that you do your job properly, without any consideration for your personal life outside of work. And yes, here we see clearly that certain aspects or facets of your life are predetermined. Certain things must happen at certain times. However, outside of this, you are completely free to make your own decisions. You have no say in the length of your life, but you have everything to say about the quality of your life. To quote the author Michael Crichton, God wound the skein of your life long before you were born. Go hide in a hole if you want. You won't live a moment longer. Question and comment number 2. In one of your lectures, you equated ease of guilt with forgiveness of sins. You said that if I follow my conscience, I will be in harmony with Christ, and my guilt will go away, and I will be free of sin. What about past errors? Like anyone else, I have made mistakes that I feel guilty about, but can't change the fact that I did them. For the most part, I'm following my conscience now as best I can, but what do I do about the guilt and shame I feel for things I've done in the past? How does the Christ within, as you put it, ease this kind of pain? Answer. Before commenting in depth on this question, we wish to remind this listener of what we said about the Lord's Prayer and how the acquisition of something must be obtained by exchanging something else for it. In this case, ease of guilt and forgiveness of past sins are the desired acquisition. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus says, "And forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors." Now, we ask that you consider what this means outside of its apparent context. Look at your past errors. Look at them without any emotion or judgment. Simply observe them. When you sin or err, you are sinning against yourself as well as someone else. Think about the implications of this for a moment. Remember the prayer, "And forgive us as we forgive others." Not only must you forgive others in order for you to be forgiven, you must also forgive yourself for having committed a sin against yourself. Remember that God keeps no record of wrongs. The guilt you are feeling is the result of your own unwillingness to forgive yourself. There may be a multitude of reasons for this, but ultimately, the reasons do not matter. If there is something you can do to repay your past debt or sin, then do it, much as in the manner of Scrooge in A Christmas Carol. However, that is a wonderful story and does not reflect real life. It is very rarely the case that one is given the opportunity to directly correct a sin we have committed against someone else. Many times this is because the individual who was the recipient of the sin you committed against him or her needed to experience it for one karmic reason or another. Rest assured, however, that at some point Either in this life or the next, you will be faced with an identical situation with different participants where you will need to make a decision, and based on the decision you make, balance the scales of divine law and pay the debt of your past error. But until such an opportunity presents itself, what is the answer? The first step is to confess your error completely and without any excuse to God, and accept freely the consequences of your action as a true man or woman should. Second, pray wholeheartedly that the individual you sinned against may be showered with God's infinite blessings of love and care, and that your prayer may amplify those blessings 1,000-fold. Third, remember clearly the moments leading up to your transgression. As you remember, right before you make your error, imagine yourself doing the exact opposite, or doing the right thing instead of the wrong, doing something in harmony with the light of God. Every time you remember your past sin, reconstruct this new imagined action. Now, you are not attempting to create a false memory here, but rather reinforce your future actions should the same situation present itself and you are faced with making the same decision. Step number 4. In the memory of your sin, step outside of yourself and look at your younger self as another individual. Say to yourself, this person is in school and is learning by doing, learning by making mistakes. I forgive this person as God has forgiven me. I keep no record of this person's wrongs, just as God keeps no record of my errors. Bless this erring child of God, and may he or she learn from this mistake and be motivated to act in harmony with God in all future similar situations. You are here to learn. You are going to make mistakes. There is no other way to learn. So be kind to yourself. Forgive yourself, and the Christ within you will forgive your sins to the exact degree that you forgive yourself and you align your thoughts, emotions, and actions with him. Comment number 3. I have heard you refer to the Christ within as female as well as male. Jesus was a man. What do you mean when you say the Christ within is female? Answer. It is important here to distinguish between the Christ light within each individual and Jesus of Nazareth, or more accurately, Yeshua, the Essene Nazarite, who, through his efforts and sacrifice, became the Christ so completely that to speak of one is to name the other. However, we must make a distinction between the two, just as Jesus made a distinction between his earthly self, the Son of Man, and his divine self, the Son of God. The Christ light within you is polarized. It can be either male or female in its characteristics depending on the needs of the soul and current karmic debt or credit. For most men, the Christ light is polarized in the feminine. For most women, it is polarized in the masculine. If you doubt this, then ask yourself why good Roman Catholic men call out to Mary, the Mother of God, when they are in distress, rather than to Jesus. The divine feminine is higher in stature than the divine masculine. It has always been so. The following is hotly debated by many rabbinical scholars. However, in Godfrey Higgins' masterwork, Anacalypsis, researched and written over a 20-year period before it was finally published in 1830, he offers the following translation to the first chapter of Genesis. Through wisdom, the goddesses created the heavens and the earth. First of all, the Hebrew word for God, Elohim, is plural, hence gods. Second, according to Higgins and his research by speaking with numerous contemporary Jewish rabbis for confirmation, Elohim is feminine, not masculine, despite what is claimed today. When one digs deeply into the origins of the Jewish faith, one finds that in the early days of Abraham, it was accepted that many gods existed. The concept of monotheism does not begin to solidify until the book of Deuteronomy, and that was written in the 7th century BC when many reforms were made to the Jewish religion, and the many gods concept was eliminated. The fact that for most men the Christ is feminine can be seen in that many a crude and sinful man will melt completely under the tongue lashings of his mother, who is the voice of his conscience rather than his father. A further historical note is the fact that originally Jehovah, or Yahweh, the God of Israel, had a wife or consort by the name of Asherah. Archaeological evidence points to the fact that she was worshipped alongside of Yahweh as his equal. It was only later in the Hebrew and finally the Jewish tradition that she was relegated to legend and myth. God, as the living embodiment of love, has no gender. However, God displays both masculine and feminine characteristics, especially in extended emanations of God designed to serve specific purposes in the universe and the world. Comment number 4. I love the Christian religion. I feel as though Christianity is under attack from all quarters, more so now than ever before in history. As I listen to your lectures, I feel as though you are trying to undermine the very foundations of Christian faith, and that you are not what you claim to be. Answer. We can understand completely why what we are teaching here in these lectures might be interpreted as you have done. Perhaps a clearer explanation of our purpose is in order. We too have watched the attacks on Christianity with dismay. We too love Christianity with all our heart and soul and strength. We would willingly give our life to defend it. We love the Christian church as well. Your host was a church organist and choir director for 30 years. We have watched with consternation how multitudes are leaving the church in droves. Mainline denominations are in financial difficulty, and church buildings are being sold and converted into apartments or museums. So, we have asked the question, why? Why is this happening? We do not believe it is because church isn't as entertaining as YouTube or TikTok, nor do we believe that it's because church is boring. No, there is but one real reason, and it is very simple. The human race can no longer blindly follow creeds and dogma. We know too much. What do we mean by this? Listen to what Jesus says in John 6:45. It is written in the prophets, they will all be taught by God. And in Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, verse 17, in the last days, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all people. Your sons and daughters will prophesy. Your young men will see visions. Your old men will dream dreams. If we believe these words to be true, then we must accept that all of us will be taught by God from within, not through church doctrine, dogmatic ritual, or creeds of faith. Humanity in general, especially here in America, will no longer blindly follow anyone or anything, be it individual, party, company, or in this case the church, without understanding what it is they are following and where it will ultimately lead. Faith and understanding must go hand in hand. For example, one must have faith that spring will arrive each year, but one must also understand that it is futile to plant crops in the winter. If the congregation is to return to the church, if churches desire their memberships to grow, then there must be a union between science and religion. There can no longer be a separation between the two. In addition, the church must be willing to open its vault of esoteric information and stop keeping it secret from the general public. Nearly every major denomination has within its hierarchy hidden teachings that are kept from their congregations. Nowhere is this truer than in the Catholic Church. Everything we are teaching you in these lectures has been known by and hidden by the Catholic Church since its inception. Now, to be clear, this was not done for evil or nefarious purposes. It was done so that the esoteric teachings would not be misused or abused. However, conditions have now changed. Nearly all esoteric information is available on the internet. The problem here is that there are those who are interpolating, abusing, and misusing it, just as the church feared would happen in its earliest days. In order to counter this dangerous threat to the naive, the uneducated, and the innocent, the church in general must step up and begin teaching these esoteric principles openly, thoroughly, and without dogmatic interpretation. Divine law and the secrets of nature, God, and the universe apply to everyone, everywhere. There are no exceptions. The sun shines on the just and unjust alike. Rain falls upon the good and the wicked. If Christian churches refuse to incorporate these higher teachings in their services and Sunday schools, then the result is inevitable. The Christian church as we know it will cease to exist, not because it fell to enemies, but because it refused to teach what Jesus, Yeshua the Essene Nazarite, secretly taught to his disciples. The difference between what Jesus taught and what the Christian church teaches is so vast that it is nearly, though not entirely, impossible to bridge the gap. Hence our efforts with these lectures to do so. Earlier in our lectures we did say that no religion can be said to be superior to another. Now when we said this, we did not mean that one should be replaced by another, especially Christianity. What we are trying to avoid, if possible, is any violence or malevolence between different religions. We cannot allow the plague of hatred in the Middle East to infect this beautiful land of ours. Our traditions, our liberty, and our faith are just too valuable. In conclusion, dear listener, we must assure you nothing would make us more pleased than to see the Christian church, especially here in America, revitalized and filled to overflowing with members. Now, it is, however, appropriate here to mention something of vital importance. It was never Jesus' intention to start a new religion. The term Christianity doesn't appear until 1,000 years after the crucifixion. The term Christianos is first documented in Antioch around 44 AD and simply meant a follower of Christ. Jesus never said to Peter that he was the rock upon which Jesus would build his religion, but the rock upon which he would build his church. Two entirely different meanings. The first has earthly implications, and the second, heavenly or spiritual. The Christian religion as we know it today was formalized, politicized, and militarized in the late 4th century AD under the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great. It was co-opted by an economic, military and industrial regime that sought to use it for political purposes rather than religious. Anything in Christianity that did not benefit the empire was done away with, sometimes by the most violent and horrific means. If Christianity is to survive, then it must drink from the springs of purity that flowed from the mouth of the Master of Galilee, and see everything else in the church for what it is, entertainment for the masses. The church will not survive if its leaders continue to preach, "Do as I say, not as I do." How many, claiming to be the mouthpiece of God, are willing to give up the very things that keep God from us? And if they are not willing, how many of them, to ease their own consciences, proclaim that good is evil and evil is good? Ask yourself these questions. Look carefully at the church today and what it is willing to tolerate in violation of divine law, and then make an evaluation. Is today's Christian church worthy of Yeshua, the Essene Nazarite, and the sacrifice he made? Or has it become merely a social institution? Only you can answer these questions for yourself. Question number 5. I listened to one of your videos where you raised the question about personal defense. You did not elaborate at the time. Can you talk more about this in the context of Jesus saying to turn the other cheek? Answer. The passage this listener is referring to comes from Matthew 5:39. But I tell you, do not resist an evil person. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to them the other cheek also. The video the listener speaks of, we believe, is video number 7, where we said, love your enemies. Hating your enemies hurts you, not them. It's not about weakly letting others abuse you. It's about breaking the cycle of hate and malice. And then we raised the question, but what about someone who is trying to kill you, steal your property, or harm those you are responsible for? Didn't Jesus say, turn the other cheek? And also, in video 10, we clarified the golden rule in the following manner. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. However, if practicable, never allow someone to do to you what you would never, under any circumstances, do to them. Now, having stated all of this, there are several things that must be pointed out. If for no reason other than you exist, someone is trying to kill you, steal your property, or harm those you are responsible for, if you do nothing to prevent their actions, then you are as guilty of the crime as they are. This is especially true if it involves the safety of those and that for which you are responsible. In other words, wife, children, property, etc. Now, what about those dedicated to national and or urban defense and find themselves in a kill or be killed situation? In such circumstances, the aggressor has brought death upon himself and must answer for it rather than the one who kills him out of necessity, rules of engagement, or duty to country or community. In instances where two individuals serving their respective countries are required to engage in battle, the divine law recognizes the necessity, and the onus for the evil falls upon those guilty of perpetrating the war in the first place, not those who must conduct it out of duty to a higher ideal. So if we claim to follow the great master's teachings, how do we resolve what we just said with his command to turn the other cheek? What Jesus is talking about here is what today is known among world leaders, law enforcement, and hostage negotiators as de-escalation. If one takes the time to research the common expressions among men in Palestine 2,000 years ago, one finds that to slap another man across the cheek was nothing more than an insult, much as the modern use of the rude hand gesture involving the middle finger. The practice of insulting someone with a slap across the face eventually evolved into a glove slapped across the face of one you wish to challenge to a duel. So what Jesus is saying here is, don't return the insult. De-escalate the situation by not responding in kind. If someone insults you, do not insult them in return. If someone is angry with you, do not respond with anger. If someone says something about you which is hurtful and untrue, respond with something kind and true about that person. If someone demands your coat under threat of violence, and this is important, and there is nothing you can do about it without endangering yourself or those who are with you, offer the thief your cloak as well. Why? Think of the dire circumstances one must be in to be driven to steal a coat. All the great master is saying here is be mindful of your fellow human beings' suffering and circumstances. Now here it might be appropriate to go out on a limb, way out on a limb, and point out that there is a reason why socialist and communist ideologies are taking root among young citizens of our nation. It is not good, nor is it to be welcomed, but there is a reason for it. All one needs to do is travel to the ghettos of any inner city here in the United States, and to witness the absolute horrors of children growing up in a home where both parents are either drug addicts or alcoholics, and the despair, illness, and hopelessness that comes as a result. For young, idealistic, compassionate individuals, socialism and communism hold out the promise of ending such suffering. To these, we must say, yes, we understand that you want to fix the problem, but the problem cannot be fixed by the redistribution of wealth by decree. As the Reverend William J.H. Boetker said, you cannot help the poor by destroying the rich. If you don't believe this, then ask yourself if you ever got a well-paying job from a poor person. The answer then is not legislation, but personal action. Let the solution begin with you, the individual. Practice voluntary socialism, and legislated socialism will be rendered impotent. If you are skilled at a vocational craft, then offer your skills where the disadvantaged may learn from your experience without cost. If you are skilled in mathematics, teach those who can't afford to go to college, or whose high school or middle school is so dangerous that the students spend more time staying alive than learning, or the teachers spend more time trying to defend themselves than teaching. And most important, if you are skilled in the art of finance, take the time to teach those who are totally ignorant of how to handle money. Now it is true you will only attract a few students willing to put forth the necessary effort, but as they are lifted up, so will they lift up the rest of their community. Legislated socialism and communism fail every time they are tried. Simply look at the economic state of socialist and communist countries all over the world, and the truth of this statement becomes self-evident. So, this is what Jesus is saying. Freely help those in need without requiring anything in return. Jesus taught and never asked for anything. He healed and required no money. He gave freely. He never said, let's pass a law that the rich must give their money to the poor. Rather, he exemplified divine law by living it, not trying to legislate it. Morality and equanimity cannot be legislated. Every attempt in history to do so has resulted in failure, if not outright disaster. All we need do is draw your attention to the results of prohibition in the early 20th century to validate this statement. Finally, we have a question from a listener regarding the nature of prayer and why so many prayers seemingly go unanswered. And this we will address fully in our next video. Thank you for sharing your time with me, and always remember, life is a magnificent adventure. Never stop learning.